should have first watched the video on purpose review, all the different ways that you can show purpose in Latin. And now we're going to talk about purpose clauses. Make sure that you have your students' notes printed out and fill them in as we go along, and you can use those later in your homework. So purpose clauses are actually pretty easy. A purpose clause is a dependent clause. And remember, if you remember, a dependent clause means it has a subject and a verb, but it doesn't make sense. It's not a complete sentence. And a purpose clause indicates the purpose or objective of an action in the main clause, and we would also call that an independent clause because it can stand alone as a complete sentence. So I parked my car in the shade so that it may stay cool inside. I parked my car in the shade is the main clause or the independent clause. If I put a period at the end of that, that would make complete sense. Here is the dependent clause, so that it may stay cool inside. That tells me why I parked my car in the shade. Another way to say that sentence is I parked my car in the shade, same way, to keep it cool, right? What is the purpose of parking the car in the shade? To keep it cool. Now in English, we commonly use an infinitive, but if you remember from our review and also what we said is that earlier classical Latin, not prose, rarely uses an infinitive to show purpose. So instead, Latin most commonly uses a subjunctive clause introduced by an ut for a positive purpose. That means doesn't have a not with it, or a ne with a negative purpose. And the reason that we use a subjunctive verb is that a purpose is something that you wish or hope for, but may or may not happen. Do you remember that would define something subjunctive, wish or way, hope for, but may or may not happen. Not factual, but you wish. Okay, so they are similar in construction to indirect commands, which you've already learned. They use the same sequence of tenses, right, for other dependent clauses. But because a purpose is unfulfilled and therefore incomplete, a primary sequence will always use present tense. And the secondary sequence will always use the imperfect tense. So you only have to worry about two. Okay? So may is frequently used in translating the present tense in a purpose clause, but we can often translate into English using an infinitive if the subject of the purpose clause is the same as that of the main clause. So here are some ways purpose clause can be translated. You have lots of options. Okay, so we're looking at the Latin sentence hoc dicit ust eos iuvat. So here we have the subjunctive. Here we have our ut clause. So we know that it's a positive. It's a not to do something. It is a do something. So here's all the different ways. He says this to help them. He says this in order to help them. He says that he may help them. He says this so that he may help them. He says this in order that he may help them. Remember, as you're getting further along in your Latin life, one of your main jobs is to how do you translate from Latin into something that makes good English sense. If you look at one of these sentences, you'll probably find one that makes more sense to you, that is more common to you, and you probably look at some, oh, I'd never say it that way. That's why there's lots of options, and that's okay. All right, so let's review. A purpose clause indicates the purpose of the action performed in the main clause. Remember, main clause can stand alone, but the dependent clause just usually gives us some more information. Right? The purpose clause is introduced by an ut, which blank, 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 so that, or nay, so that this, not that, right? Now, the subjunctive will be in the present or imperfect tense. So for present tense subjunctive, translate so that subject may verb. Locos dico ut rideas. Remember, this is let's beat that giant. I tell jokes so that you may laugh. For an imperfect tense subjunctive, translate ... so that subject might verb. Locos dixi ut, here we have the ut positive, rideres. I told jokes so that you may laugh. Now, it's often possible to use an alternate translation for nay, and you can also use it as lest. And so instead of not, you can use lest. Lokos diko ne dolias. I tell jokes so that you may not be sad, or I tell jokes lest you be sad. Right. So, if the main verb and the dependent verb have the same subject, you may translate as in order to, or just for the to, right? In order, if it helps you and if it makes more sense. So, huc venimus ut requiescamus. We come here so that we may relax, or we come here in order to relax, or we come here just to relax. We come here to relax. Another example would be huc venimus ut, again the positive, requiesceremus. We came here so that we might relax, or we came here in order to relax. Okay, so notice the only difference is come and came, present tense versus imperfect, and something in the past, only two tenses. Now, you should have no difficulty recognizing a purpose clause. Look for a dependent clause introduced by an ut or nay. That is your key. That is key. They always have an ut or a nay, ending with a subjunctive verb and answering the question why or for what purpose. That is all there is to it.